taken out of context.
Taken out of context.
Taking things out of context.
Out of context.
Taken out of context.
Taken out of context.
In the context.
We have more context.
Out of context.
Taken out of context.
That is so out of context.
Out of context.
You're taking it out of context.
Now, hey, hold on. So we're gonna flesh this out because I don't want nobody saying we don't take things in context.
Clipped me out of context.
It was out of context.
It's hard for your words to be taken out of context.
The full context.
In a modern day context.
Tell me the context.
Another important reminder as to why context is so important. So,
hello, I'm Barbara Ann, and welcome back to my channel, Straight Out of Context. I am so glad that you are here with me today. We are going to discuss Aileen Wuornos, America's first female serial killer. We're going to talk about her early life, her trauma, the abuse that she suffered, her relationships, her crimes, and her execution. Aileen Wuornos was born Aileen Carol Pittman on February 29th of 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Aileen's mother, Diane Wuornos, who was born in 1939, was only 16 years old when she gave birth to Aileen. Diane Wuornos was only 14 years old when she married Aileen's father, 18-year-old Leo Pittman, born in 1936. Some reports claim that they eloped on January of 1954. Others say that they married on June 3rd of 1954. On March 14th of 1955, Diane would give birth to Aileen's older brother, Keith. Her father, Leo, would be arrested for petty crimes in March of 1955 when Keith was born, and he was given the choice to enlist in the army in exchange for not having to do time for his petty crimes. And so he did. Diane fled, filed for divorce, and 7 months later gave birth to Aileen while living with her parents. She then abandoned them, never to reclaim Keith and Aileen ever again. Aileen Wuornos would never meet her father. In 1967, Leo Pittman was sentenced to life imprisonment for kidnapping and raping a 7-year-old girl. Pittman was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he committed suicide by hanging in prison on January 30th of 1969. In January of 1960, when Wuornos was almost 4 years old, Diane would abandon her children for good, leaving them with their maternal grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos, both severe alcoholics, who would go on to legally adopt Keith and Aileen on March 18th of 1960. Lori and Britta were Finnish Americans who were born in Finland and later moved to Michigan. It is also very important to note that Diane and Leo, at the ages of 14 and 18, were already severe alcoholics and had a very violent, volatile relationship. When Lori and Britta Wuornos adopted Keith and Aileen, they also had their other children, Lori, a daughter, and an older son, Barry. Despite struggling with alcoholism, Britta was the only source of love and compassion in Aileen's life. At only 54 years old, on July 7th of 1971, her grandmother would pass away. Aileen was only 15 years old. This loss was not only detrimental to Aileen, but them as a family unit. It would go on to exacerbate her grandfather's already significant alcohol issues. Her grandfather, Lori Wuornos, would pass away on March 12th of 1976, and this is extremely critical to note this, because only 4 months later, on July 17th of 1976, same year, her brother Keith Pittman Wuornos would also pass away suddenly at the age of 21 from esophageal cancer. Aileen herself was only 20 years old. The only people she had left was Barry and Lori, her adopted siblings, who were really her maternal uncle and aunt, her mother's siblings.
Was very strict. We would get spankings with a belt, with our pants down, to discipline us.
We never did anything to the neighborhood kids, but to them. I mean, he was always mean to Aileen and Keith, always.
Sudden abandonment, dysfunctional family dynamics, severe neglect, sexual abuse, physical violence, drugs, and alcohol not only marked but scarred Aileen for life, way before the losses and the grief ever did.
By the time Aileen was 10, the two children began to experiment sexually with each other.
She did have sex with Keith
Apparently it was consensual, and this did happen on several occasions, and yes, one of the neighborhood boys witnessed it.
At the time, I didn't really know it was wrong, what they were doing, you know, and yeah, they had sex.
Mark Fern and Dawn Bodkins are only two of the childhood friends who have come forward and said that this kind of behavior was happening as early as 10 years old.
Aileen seemed quite happy and willing participant in those activities. They were so young. You can't say innocent, but in a way it was innocent.
By the age of 11, Aileen Wuornos began engaging in sexual activities in school in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, a place to sleep, clothing, and food. Wuornos not only engaged in sexual activities with her brother willingly, she also has claimed that her alcoholic grandfather had sexually assaulted her and beaten her when she was a child, a claim that would strongly be denied by Barry Wuornos. However, Lori Wuornos would back up a lot of the claims that Aileen would have against her grandfather, including the claim that before beating her, he would force her to strip out of her clothes. Lori backed this claim up, saying that the same exact thing happened to her and Keith. She spoke in a documentary saying that she knows this happened because she not only witnessed it, it happened to her as well. At the age of 12, Aileen started hanging out with an elderly neighbor who was recently widowed. It was stated by her lifelong and best friend, Dawn Bodkins, that this man was lonely, but he would purchase cigarettes and alcohol for neighborhood children and teenagers. Aileen had been spending a lot of time alone with this gentleman in exchange for cigarettes, a place to sleep, food, and alcohol. While sleeping over at his house and very intoxicated one night, Aileen would wake up to find that she had been sexually assaulted. In 1970, at age 14, she became pregnant by that same man. She would give birth to a baby boy at a home for unwed, wayward mothers on March 23rd of 1971. She never got to hold or bond with her baby boy before he was ripped from her arms and immediately put up for adoption. A couple months after her son was born, she officially dropped out of high school after returning back to her grandparents' home. At that same time, her grandmother would suddenly die from acute liver failure. At 15 years old, and with the sudden passing of her grandmother, her grandfather would kick her out of the house for good. Her grandfather was unable to manage and to deal with Aileen's increasingly negative behavior. He threw her out of the house, and then she began living in the woods near the home and supported herself through prostitution. This area in the woods in which she lived was known as the Pits because many teenage children would hang out there.
Yeah, we had some good times. They weren't all bad.
While she was on death row, Aileen said this to her best friend. "Dear Lord Jesus, I know I've done some wicked things in my life. And Lord God, I know I deserve every bit of the rot of hell for doing them all too." She also would go on to say that she had sex with many boys as a kid, including her own brother. One key fact that many people do not know is that on May 27th of 1974, at age 18, Aileen Wuornos was arrested in Jefferson County, Colorado for driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, and firing a .22 caliber pistol from a moving vehicle. She was later charged with failure to appear. Aileen has always maintained through documentaries and letters that at age 16, she left Michigan with only Florida on her mind. She also reconciles with the Lord that she also messed with a lot of drugs in her life. However, at 20 years old, not only would she lose her grandfather suddenly, but 4 months later, she would lose her brother. She would end up inheriting $10,000 from a life insurance policy that her brother left her. So it's hard to say for sure whether or not she actually came to Florida the first time at 16 or if she was not older, but we do know at 18 she was in Colorado and she quickly fled Colorado. We also know that in 1976, Aileen hitchhiked back to Florida, where she met 69-year-old yacht club president Louis Gratz Fell. They married quickly, and the announcement of their nuptials was printed in the local newspaper's society pages. Wuornos continually involved herself in confrontations at their local bar and went to jail briefly for assault. She also hit her elderly husband with his own cane, leading him to gain a restraining order against her within weeks of the marriage. Aileen would return back to Michigan, where on July 14th of 1976, she was arrested at Bernie's Club in Mansalona, Antrim County, and charged with assault and disturbing the peace for throwing a cue ball at a bartender's head. Following this, on July 17th, her brother Keith died of esophageal cancer, and Wuornos received that $10,000 from his life insurance. Wuornos and her husband annulled their marriage on July 21st after only 9 weeks. August of 1976, Wuornos was given a $105 fine for drunk driving. She used the money inherited from her brother's death to pay the fine and spent the rest within 2 months buying luxuries, including a new car, which she wrecked shortly after. In 1978, at the age of 22, she attempted to take her life by shooting herself in the stomach. Between the ages of 14 and 22, she attempted to take her life over 6 times. On May 20th of 1981, Wuornos was arrested in Edgewater, Florida, for the armed robbery of a convenience store, where she stole $35 and 2 packs of cigarettes. She was sentenced to prison on May 4th of 1982 and released on June 30th of 1983. On May 1st of 1984, Wuornos was arrested for attempting to pass a forged check at a bank in Key West. November 30th of 1985, she was named as a suspect in the theft of a revolver and ammunition in Pasco County. January 4th, 1986, Wuornos was arrested in Miami and charged with car theft, resisting arrest, and obstruction of justice for providing identification bearing her aunt's name. Miami police officers found a .38 caliber revolver and a box of ammunition in the stolen car. On June 2nd of 1986, the Volusia County Deputy Sheriffs detained Wuornos for questioning after a male companion accused her of pulling a gun in his car and demanding $200. Wuornos was found to be carrying spare ammunition, and law enforcement discovered a .22 pistol under the passenger seat that she had occupied. In 1986, 30-year-old Aileen Wuornos met 24-year-old Tyria Moore, a motel maid, at a Daytona Beach gay bar called Zodiac. They immediately moved in together, and Wuornos supported them both with her earnings as a prostitute. On July 4th of 1987, Daytona Beach police detained Wuornos and Moore at a bar for questioning regarding an incident in which they were accused of assault and battery with a beer bottle. On March 12th of 1988, Wuornos accused a Daytona Beach bus driver of assault. She claimed that he pushed her off the bus following a confrontation. Moore was listed as a witness to the incident. Later at her trial, Wuornos stated, quote, "It was love beyond imaginable. Earthly words cannot describe how I felt about Tyria. This love may arguably be not only her biggest strength, but her biggest downfall." Before her execution, Aileen Wuornos claimed that she still loved Tyria Moore and that she was still in love with Tyria Moore. Between November of 1989 and November of 1990, 7 men would come up deceased by homicide. For 5 years, Aileen Wuornos and Tyria Moore were in an exclusive relationship. Their intense romantic relationship ended right before Wuornos was finally arrested in 1991. Her relationship with Moore was actually her second relationship with a woman. Together, Aileen and Tyria had sold stolen items at Florida pawn shops. During the murder investigations, Volusia County police discovered items belonging to Richard Mallory at local pawn shops, with a receipt showing Aileen's thumbprint. Law enforcement traced other stolen items from Mallory to Wuornos. A camera from Mallory's automobile was found inside a rented warehouse unit, which was opened with a key taken from Wuornos. Wuornos had rented the unit under an alias. Police traced other items from Mallory's car to people or pawn shops that Wuornos had contacted or sold them to. The victims, starting in November of 1989, was 51-year-old Charles Mallory. It was 8 months from this first crime to the second one. In June of 1990, 2 men would come up deceased, 47-year-old David Andrew Spears and Charles Edmund Karkskaden. Then, in July of 1990, Peter Abram Sims, 65, would come up deceased. August of 1990, Troy Eugene Burress, 50. September of 1990, Charles Richard Humphreys, 56. And the last of the 7, November of 1990, Walter Gino Antonio, 61. It's often speculated that Tyria Moore was not suspicious but had actually known the entire time what Aileen Wuornos was really doing. By 1990, Tyria Moore decided to go back to Pennsylvania to be with family, despite eyewitnesses just weeks before seeing Aileen and Tyria in a stolen automobile of which they crashed right in front of the eyewitnesses' home. And despite all the stolen identities, driver's licenses, merchandise, all the stolen vehicles, on top of the 7 murders, law enforcement was very much aware that Tyria Moore played a bigger role than what Aileen had let on, and that she had willingly sent her back to live with family, knowing that the walls were closing in on her.
It's an ugly, fat-ass lesbian that had a double ugly, fat-ass girlfriend.
That is the undercover officer who helped in the sting operation to trap Aileen Wuornos and to finally capture her. Law enforcement did a sting operation at the Last Resort bar where Aileen Wuornos and Tyria Moore were known to frequent. Aileen Wuornos had many outstanding warrants, so they used this as an excuse to take her down. What Aileen Wuornos didn't know was that law enforcement had tracked down her ex, Tyria Moore, in her family's home in Ohio and used her to elicit a full confession from Aileen. The undercover officer says that he knows he was going to be her 8th victim, as she told him to bring all of his money and get a motel room.
Did you put it in after all, please?
I cannot stand this.
Hey, ma'am, I got the room, okay?
The undercover officer can be seen wearing a black leather jacket. His only job was to watch Aileen and to keep his eyes on her at all times. He ends up getting a motel room for the night to make her believe that she actually has a place to go and that he's going to be her John for the night. She is completely blindsided by all of this. And this is the point where she begins to realize that this is a setup, that this is a sting, that the guy is probably involved in some kind of way, and that something's going on. What they end up bringing Aileen in on is warrants. But here, they confuse her even further because the undercover officer gets into a fake physical altercation with law enforcement officers. He is arrested, he is placed in the back of the car with her, and they do that first and foremost to protect him as their undercover informant. But still, at this point, they don't have enough to charge Aileen Wuornos with 7 different homicides. In fact, they don't even know that she's involved with that many. They bring her in on a warrant, which arguably she had many of.
What's going on, girl?
I don't know.
What kind of trouble you in?
I don't know what's going on. I have no idea.
What's going on here?
Neither do I. So what the hell? You want to tell me?
You tell me.
Tell me. I don't know. I'm lost.
And just like that, in 1991, Aileen Wuornos was finally arrested. But law enforcement knew that they didn't have a very good case against her, not without a confession.
Hello?
What?
I'm not going to let you go to jail.
Aileen Wuornos was a very intelligent and street-savvy woman. She knew what was happening. She can tell by the way that Tyria had been speaking to her that law enforcement had their grips on her. But unfortunately for Aileen, loyalty and love would be her downfall.
Yo, piss on the fire and call in the dog, boys. This hunt's over with. We got her.
Ty certainly knew about Aileen's activities because she participated in many of them. However, she would testify against Aileen at the trial of Richard Mallory, the first trial she would undergo. This betrayal would not only come as a shock to Aileen, it would sting her for life. Aileen decided to go to law enforcement and make a full confession so she wouldn't implicate Tyria, but she wasn't ready. She later writes that she wanted to dry out from her alcoholism first. Alcohol addiction would not only be the central focus of Aileen's life, it would become her tool, a mechanism for coping. Aileen solely confessed because she did not want her girlfriend implicated in any kind of way. She wanted to clear the air and let them know that she had nothing to do with any of the homicides. Aileen Wuornos was not a heartless, soulless woman. She was a woman who was like many, born to tragic circumstances that she could not overcome. Like every human, she longed to be loved for who she was, and she thought she found that in Ty. She thought she found forever.
I hope she meets up with, quote, old Sparky. You know who old Sparky is. And if the other lady so wishes, she can stand there and hold her hand as far as I'm concerned.
To me, this world is nothing but evil, and all of us are full of evil one way or another. In whatever we do. We have evil in us, all of us do. And my evil would just happen to come out because of the circumstances of what I was doing. Hitchhiking, hooking.
Ty not only knew about Aileen's crimes, she was partaking in many of them. But she also knew that Aileen loved her so much, she was doing what she was doing to supplement their lifestyle and to support her. Ty not only had an alcohol addiction, she wanted to be a kept woman.
On the road, I was a homeless person all my life. And then the hitchhiking, hooking, I learned off the homelessness and cruising all over the United States of America and stuff. And so learning how to be a hooker as a hitchhiker.
Right.
Eventually got tiring. In the end, I carried the gun for protection, but then I got where I was getting a real problem. Our rent was due, $1,200 behind. Tyra was doing a lot of beer drinking and stuff. She wanted to go out all the time, so she was burning up the money I was making. I was making good, about $200-300 a day, sometimes $150.
Did she know what you were doing?
Oh yeah, Ty always knew everything I was doing.
Aileen Wuornos spent almost 12 years on death row. During that time, she wrote many letters to her childhood best friend, Dawn Bodkins. Dawn Bodkins still lives here in Michigan, not only 30 minutes away from me. This is where Aileen Wuornos' ashes are buried, on her property under a tree. She also has a safe with all of the letters and cards. But Aileen hated people making money off of her, and that's exactly what Dawn Bodkins has been doing since her execution. She's been paid to partake in many documentaries, and she's also been selling memorabilia since 2002.
Everybody seems like they just care about the money. They don't care about me. Aileen Wuornos killed 7 people. She deserves to die. Who gives a darn? Let's make some money and forget about her. But that's not the point. I say it's this. The principle is self-defense. They say it's the number. I say it's a principle. The heck with what... It has nothing to do with the number killed. It's the principle. But they're saying if there's a number.
Aileen was a very intelligent woman, and she knew how to play up the media and journalists. She started to loathe and hate the media attention on her. And of course, she was no stranger to manipulating the press and the mainstream media with lies about her crimes, claiming that they were all self-defense because she was SA'd. There is still much speculation, even today, from experts, from social media, from the public at large, that believe her first murder of Richard Mallory was actually in self-defense. However, we know from the letters that she sent to her friend Dawn Bodkins over her entire stay on death row that that's not the case. They had spent over 10 hours all day together drinking before it came to the point where Aileen snapped and murdered him. We do know one thing for certain. Aileen was deep in her alcohol addiction, and she was utilizing that alcohol addiction in order to perpetrate this cycle she had of committing these crimes, armed robbery, and doing it all over again. It's also largely speculated that she had undiagnosed mental health issues that were exacerbated by her alcohol consumption. Was she really a cold-hearted, soulless murderer who just hated men? Or was she a broken woman who suffered from a life of tragic events and approaching middle age, was tired of the hard street life, was tired of prostitution, was tired of it all, and just thought this is much easier to do it this way and to take everything somebody owns and just walk away and act like nothing happened versus trying to get straight and sober and clean. The sad part is that Aileen Wuornos tried to go sober and straight many times in her life, always relapsing back into her alcohol addiction. The street life was the only life that Aileen Wuornos ever knew. And unfortunately, in the 80s and 90s, the supports and resources available were few and far between for people who really wanted to get clean. Aileen Wuornos would speak very openly and candidly in letters, in cards, in documentaries, in interviews about her childhood and about used her, that all she wanted was love, that she was constantly used, discarded, dismissed, thrown away, overlooked, that she was never actually seen as a person, as a woman. She was a woman who was deserving of being loved. She was deserving of compassion. She was deserving of being seen. But ultimately, she was correct. The media and people were just quick to make a buck off of her and very quick to use her. For the last 23 years, her lifelong childhood friend, Dawn Bodkins, has been making money doing documentaries and selling memorabilia, letters, cards, other things that Aileen had sent her, drawings, and the fact that she had confessed the entire truth to her. Aileen originally tried to go with the whole self-defense because this person was trying to SA her. However, that was quickly shot down when she admitted in her letters to Dawn Bodkins that she and Richard Mallory spent the entire day together drinking and that she doesn't really remember exactly what happened. She did, however, remember snapping, suddenly taking his life and then robbing him. And this was proven when his body was found because his jeans pockets were flipped inside out. She also confessed to law enforcement, telling them that she was only interested in clearing Tyria and that she had been intoxicated.
We were sitting on the floor watching TV, and she just come out and said, "I have something to tell you." And I asked her what, and she said that she had shot and killed a man that day.
During her incarceration, Arlene Prale and her husband, who were born-again Christians, would adopt Aileen Wuornos. She later would come out and say that they were doing the same thing, using her. Not only had she urged Aileen to take her own life while in prison, she also wanted the rights to her life story. This betrayal would deeply impact Aileen and hurt her, but she did the right thing and came forward and confessed because she didn't want Ty to take the blame for the actual murders. She knew about them, yes. She failed to go to law enforcement, yes, but she did not partake in them and she was not there for any of them. Ty testified that Aileen loved her, and she also testified that she said she would do anything for her as well. Aileen would tell her friend Dawn in many letters exactly what happened and tell the truth, owning all of the culpability and responsibility for her actions. Aileen's only concern was with Ty, if she was okay, if she was sick, and she ended up passing on a message to Dawn, letting her know that she does not want to talk to Aileen Wuornos ever again and she has moved on with her life. After a betrayal so harsh, at least she did something decent and gave her that closure. Aileen wrote, "No matter how much I love her and how much I showed it to her, she was still willing to take me down. Ironically, I still love her too. And that's because of all the good memories and the good times we shared." The sad theme of Aileen's life, people claiming to love her and then using her for their own means and their own money, taking her story and using her as a cash cow. Aileen would go on to tell her friend Dawn that she was totally confused. She was so disoriented from watching Tyria betray her. And in fact, you see her break down multiple times during the trial and her subsequent trials. Aileen knew exactly what was coming. She knew from the moment she was arrested. She knew weeks prior that law enforcement was starting to close in. That's why Ty went back to Ohio to live with family just weeks before the sting operation at the Last Resort bar when she was arrested. She was certainly hot-headed and hot-tempered, and she certainly tried to run the defense strategy that she had been SA'd and that she killed out of pure self-defense. But before her execution and to her friend Dawn Bodkins, she would confess everything. She would release her soul of all of that pent-up anger and all of the lies she had been telling.
State of Florida versus Aileen Wuornos, also known as Susan Lynn Blahovic, also known as Lori Christine Grady, also known as Candy Marsh Green. As to count one, the majority of the jury, by a vote of 12-0, advise and recommend to the court that it impose the death penalty upon Aileen Wuornos, also known as Susan Lynn Blahovic, also known as Lori Christine Grady, also known as Candy Marsh Green.
By warrant of the governor of the state of Florida, you, Aileen Wuornos, be electrocuted until you are dead. And may God have mercy upon your court.
Judges usually show compassion to the condemned by saying, "May God have mercy on your soul." However, her judge said, "May God have mercy on your corpse," denoting that she was so evil she didn't even have a soul. She forfeited all of her appeals and she was ready to face her execution. However, they changed it from the electric chair to lethal injection.
Her time to think about the life she took. After you're done killing the person and you realize what you've done, it'll haunt you the rest of your life. If there was a lot of love there and I took your person away, I'm really sorry. I mean, I have to look in the camera and say, man, I really am sorry.
She showed immense remorse and regret, and she even formally apologized to the families of her victims. She even purged her soul and formally asked for forgiveness. October 9th of 2002, Aileen Wuornos was officially put to death in the state of Florida by lethal injection.
She wanted me to scatter her ashes on Flaggers Beach in Daytona, and I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think anybody in Florida, after you killing all them men, want your ashes here. You're coming to my home where you're loved.
Aileen Wuornos was cremated, and her best friend from her childhood, Dawn Bodkins, was with her during her last hours, during her execution, and brought her cremated remains back to Lapeer, Michigan, and buried her cremated remains under a tree on her property, where they still are to this day. Aileen wanted her body to be where nobody could touch it or get to it.
This is her special spot.
Aileen wrote a letter to Dawn saying this: "Dear Dawn, here are the 3 things I made history in. Number 1, I became the first female serial killer. Number 2, I had the quickest trial in American history to date. And number 3, I'm the only person, man or woman, to ever receive 6 death penalties in a row." Aileen Wuornos certainly had an entire life marked with tragedy, with trauma, with abuse. And this is where the debate of nature versus nurture comes into play. Because yes, it is easy for people to say, get a real job, get sober, get clean, make something of yourself. But many people face a harsh reality that they cannot just overcome and overturn their circumstances and do that, especially when everybody that has ever been in their life does nothing but make it impossible for them to do so.
Of Tyra Moore and Dawn Bodkins together at the courthouse. Tyra Moore. Ty quit writing her. That bothered Eileen's heart really bad. So she wrote me and had me write Ty. Ty wrote her letter, said she moved on with life, so she can't never write her again. But at least she did that, so Aileen could quit thinking about it all the time. That's all she thought about.
Aileen Wuornos would take the lives of 7 men in 12 months. However, Peter Sims, his body was never recovered, and so they never took her to trial for his case. They didn't need to. By taking her to trial 6 other times and securing a conviction 6 times and the death penalty 6 times, they put the nail in her coffin 6 times. And they did this strategically because if she had any appeals, any violation, any ineffective counsel, or any legal technicalities that may have overturned any of the cases, the other 5 would certainly stick. The case of Aileen Wuornos would completely flip the script, turning the tables on what everybody thinks should normally happen. Normally, the prostitutes end up dead and nobody bats an eye. In this case, the prostitute is the one that had authority over herself and her crime.
After my mom died, my dad got pissed. He's like, okay, this is the last straw. You know, I think you are the cause of Mom's death because she had physical problems because of all the stress and the pain and the suffering and everything. And what I'm going through as a wild kid is pissing him off. I mean, my family was right on when I was thinking that. I meant as far as my mom not dying, my dad not freaking out, and us. If I could do it all over again. My family died too young. I had to hit the road.
Before she died, she wanted to clear the air on everything that had happened in her life. She wanted to let everybody know that regardless and despite her circumstances, if her childhood would have been different, she would have turned out different. And she was certain of this fact. She suffered an immense amount of childhood abuse, neglect, and trauma. Her losses early in life not only marked her life, it became the epitome of everything she was, the good and the bad. But remember, she didn't start off a monster. She was inevitably made one. 3 days before her execution, Nick Bloomfield, who did a documentary about Aileen and her execution, would track down her birth mother, Aileen Wuornos. When asked about why she was thrown out of the house by her grandfather at 15 after having given birth to a child and being at a wayward home for women, her mother said she knew nothing about it, pretending that she had no idea. Nick Bloomfield then tells her, yeah, that's what led her to the street life, prostituting and hitchhiking. And her mom replied, quote, but she liked it, unquote. Remember, she's speaking about Aileen when she was a 15-year-old minor child. And she also asked Nick, did any agency ever come pick her up? To which he responds, no. She also tries to insinuate that Aileen had some kind of mental defect because she was born breech, feet first. And then she also says, quote, I will be much more relaxed after she's executed, unquote. Despite the fact that she wouldn't be there for the execution, nor did she take into consideration that Aileen was the safest and the healthiest while on death row. She does, for camera's sake, ask Nick to pass on a message to Aileen that she's asking her for her forgiveness, which she does not grant. And here is where the universe, karma, God, works in mysterious ways. Not only a month after Aileen was executed on October 9th of 2002, in November of 2002, at only 63 years old, Aileen Wuornos would drop dead, living just long enough to witness the untimely death of her parents, but the tragic passing of both of her children. Another point in which Aileen Wuornos was ultimately proven right on. Aileen Wuornos was called many things: monster, first female serial killer, boogie woman, damsel of death. But one thing is true: she was a woman who was once deserving of love and was deprived of all of it, denied all of the good and beautiful things in life. And this summarizes the tragic life of Aileen Wuornos.